family kind of imploding. I don't know. He was never my favorite, actually. So you can follow with me. So last year, you know that I came here and I did captions and everything. So now I'm also trying something different. So you can follow with me. You can use that QR code or go to akka.ms/Rubyfuza. So all the slides are there, a lot of material, and at the end of it, you can also use the QR code. So who am I? Well, let me show you a little bit, and I've got 30 minutes to prove a few points with you. So, hi everyone, my name is Rory. I throw parties for developers at Microsoft, and I'm what they call an audience developer, which is a nice way to say that I'm an evangelist on the marketing side. So if you want to reach out to me, you can give me a shout and I'll introduce you to a few nice communities, conferences. Recently through a small conference in Johannesburg for 6,500 people. Yeah, I've got some learnings on that. But I also have achondroplasia, dwarfism. And this is the subject of my talk is really introducing you, because I'm a little bit of an anomaly because I don't really have a disability except for not being able to cook anything. I can make toast with an iron, and I can boil the best kettles in my hotel room, sorry, the best sausages in the kettle. Okay, so wash it out a couple of times if you ever get into my hotel room. But the subject also is accessibility for all. So for a year I've been speaking on how to actually test accessibility, and I've actually got a little demo on how to test accessibility, but it occurred to me that I can't just approach developers. I need to actually look at the entire view holistically, instead of having bolt-on right at the end. And we've seen a huge shift in DevOps on something, I'm going to try not to jump here, something called shift left. And shift left is testing onto the left. So the start of my journey was actually bolting on accessibility items onto my everyday life. So these are my car pedals on my midlife crisis, my start of my midlife crisis, 335i BMW. If you want to know how to start a midlife crisis, do not buy a car. That's like number one of midlife crisis. And I bolt on things as I progress through my life. So this is me lecturing at a university, and this is me attempting to get a good cup of coffee or tequila. You know, both go interchangeably. But I still felt a little bit left out. So who can tell me who's left out of this picture right now? Yeah, Jared Leto. Hey, no, we're going to forget about him though. So I felt a little bit left out, and I've been trying to actually promote and speak on accessibility in every opportunity, and also introduce the shift left movement. So first, let's go back. What changed? What happened in our ecosystem that brought us to the stage that now we are more accessibility focused? And this over here is the Xbox Adaptive Controller. So even gaming now is becoming accessible. So I like to think what really changed is the Agile movement. And you'll see that I have a love-hate relation with Agile, but the Agile movement really kind of said, we want control. We want control over our ecosystem, and we want to do the right thing. I'm not going to read the manifesto. You guys can probably have this like imprinted into your brain, but the focus really is that the development team knows what is right. So if we know what's right, then what did we actually introduce? And we introduced something called aligned autonomies. You've got your organization, roles, teams, cadence, architecture, plans, and practices. And Agile really gave us the alignment and the autonomy. So the teams then could actually go and have the locus of control. So a really good book that defines this is Daniel H. Pink's Drive. Let's give our teams three things: autonomy, mastery, and purpose. So before we had all of these processes, and before Agile, we had these kind of long-winded processes. I remember I worked for a financial services company, and I said to them, okay, when are we going to go live? And they said, where are we now? Winter. Okay, cool. Autumn. But that's like in a year's time. Yeah, that's our go live processes. Like we go live, and if you miss that exact window, then you go live the following winter. And we gained a lot. We really did gain a lot from Agile, but we also kind of lost a little bit. And I'm here to introduce a few things that we can reintroduce. So what did we really lose? we lost my nice little office, with my lockable door, and I could actually do that. And we gained the open office, where people actually go and make popcorn and Indian food, and play, reggae music without, so we gained that. We also, I can clean a whiteboard really efficiently, though. I have many, many mechanisms on how to clean a whiteboard. I also learned how to stick Post-it notes pretty well. And the idea behind I went on a course to how to stick Post-it notes. You hold the Post-it note here, you take your finger, and you slowly kind of introduce the finger into the Post-it notes, and then you rip it off there so you don't actually damage the glue. Yeah, no, if you take one thing out of this right now, then... and the good news is that I'm giving away an MX Chip IoT dev kit at the end of this. So concentrate. I'm going to ask a question. So it's a nice little Azure MX IoT kit, though. The Post-it note thing is not going to be asked. Okay, that's just a freebie that I'm going to give you. So we gained a lot. We gained processes. We lost a little bit also. But something that we also noticed in the agile processes is something called the accessibility hydra. We constantly had accessibility issues coming out, and we chopped off one of the heads, and we tested again, and then another came out, and we tested again, and we chopped off another head, and we kept on chopping and chopping and chopping, and we couldn't really, the accessible community and the agile community couldn't really work out what was going on, because we are agile, we're testing all the time, we're unit testing all the time. What is actually going on? And the thing is that we lacked a certain kind of ikigai. So what is ikigai? Ikigai is the Japanese pursuit of purpose. And it takes your different elements of your life and it imposes them into a Venn diagram, and it gives you the ability to see exactly what your purpose is. So we lost some sort of ikigai, and what I believe is that we lost empathy. Yeah, this is like the worst example of empathy, but these are my heroes there. And we lost the because with Ikigai, we still had all of our other side projects that we were constantly focusing on. And the last thing that you want to do when you have a huge deadline with the flight or fight, the challenge response, is that you forget about the human side of it. And then you have an ikigai, which is a bit different. Like, who wants to help with, accessibility issues? Bank robbers, preachers, DJs, cops, and roller coasters. Put your hands up. I'll help with your ikigai. Because if you're standing in this room now, you actually exist in an empathy bubble. Because everyone's certain specific accessibility issues are different. Even if you have an accessibility disability or a problem, you don't have it exactly the same as the other person next to you. Everyone is unique, though. And this is a fascinating concept, because then how do you actually get that empathy? How do you come into their empathy in VisiCircle? Don't ever quote me on that, okay? Because if not, then you kind of go at an attempt to create an accessibility option, and you mess up, and we have the hydra. You just keep on chopping those heads off until eventually you step back and you say, I can't chop anymore. So we've got a plan. We've got a plan to kind of solve this in the next 20 minutes. So we're going to understand your organization's unique accessibility motivators, stick or carrot. We're going to set achievable interim milestones. We're going to implement tools. And then finally, we're going to measure, improve, and automate the agile way. So first, let's start with the definition of accessibility. So this is not accessible. That's the opposite of accessibility. But accessibility is the design of products, services, environments so that everyone, including people with disability, can fully experience them. The design up front. And what we believe at Microsoft is that if you design with accessibility in mind, you create innovation. And I've spoken numerous times at other conferences around that, but the basic principle about that is that you can design and you can extend to many. And let's look at another definition. What isn't disability? So disability is not a personal health condition. Another kind of mindset change, you need to get into the empathy bubble. You don't go to a doctor and say to them, hey, I'm not feeling too well, and the doctor says to you, I think you've got disability. It doesn't work like that. Disability is a mismatched human interaction. You design a system, and the only time that a person knows that they're disabled is if their system doesn't work for them. So let me introduce WCAG, the accessibility guidelines. And we're going to focus a little bit on web, but there are also accessibility guidelines for apps, though. So level A deals with most basic accessibility features. Having a alt tag on an image would be level A. Level AA signifies the biggest and most common barriers for disabled users. If you've noticed, there's been a big drive to actually caption videos. And that's because there is a motivator coming up that actually defines a requirement to have level A, AA. And finally, level AAA, which is you're kind of designing towards accessibility issues. So if you have a product for the blind or for the mobility challenged. WCAG also has principles. So perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. So perceivable, can you see it? So these actually cater for problems such as being able to have a screen reader for visually impaired people. Operable, can you use it? So having a navigable keyboard for people who have mobility issues. Understandable, can you understand it? So a lot of websites now are catering for people who have ADHD and on the autism spectrum. And that's a recently introduced requirement. And robust, it won't break future technologies. So when a new JavaScript library comes in, then it won't actually break a accessible website. So to define this and to look at it, how are we going to get into the empathy bubble with these settings, I've got a nice little demo, and it's going to be used accessibilityinsights.io. So we've recently open sourced our entire toolchain that we use to make our Microsoft websites accessible, which is office.com, the Microsoft Store, the Microsoft sites. Everything that we have is actually using accessibilityinsights.io. So I've got a little, oh, that's close. So I've got a little website here. This is the W3org site here. And you'll see here I've got accessible and inaccessible. So accessible here, you will get an alt tag, you'll get link items that are properly linked. And if I click on inaccessible, what do you think would change to us, to you and me? Nothing. But it becomes immediately inaccessible to people with other accessible requirements. You can show annotations here, and you can actually go through here, and you'll see one of the examples here is that the link not visually distinct, and let's close that, and the alt tags and the link items here also aren't actually structured in proper HTML. So how do we actually test this? So let me just click through that. Hide annotations. So in the Chrome store, so this is Chrome. We're friends with everyone. Microsoft plays well with everyone. So you can actually go and download the Accessibility Insights for Web, or you can do it on Edge or Edge Insider. And when you click through that, you'll see there that you can actually do FastPass assessment and ad hoc tools. So FastPass checks for 25% of the most common accessibility issues. Assessment runs through the entire WCAG 2.0 AA requirements. And then ad hoc tools, you can switch on colors, you can switch off colors, and you can do tab stop. So we're going to run FastPass here. Make sure it's then inaccessible. And it's going to bring up a report now. And it's got color contrast, has lang, image alt, and you can go through there and it'll give that report there. And then there's one other thing that we added there because we wanted to add it into the agile process. It's important to be able to add in an agile process to be able to create a visual representation. We've seen that with Cucumber reports and unit testing. You need a visual representation. So if you go through here, that should have actually done that. Let's try that again. Visual helper. Else I'm going to go to another browser, embarrassingly. FastPass. Wow, okay. We're going to go to another browser. Let's try Edge. This is the first time I've done it the other way around, actually. Okay, so let's go inaccessible. We're going to go through there. And we're going to go FastPass. I'm going to run the report. That's great. We're going to come back here. Yay, Edge works. Okay, cool. Blatant blatant sell to Microsoft right there. Please tell everyone to pay my salary after that. Great. Now you can actually go through now the links there, and if I click over a link, you'll see now that it gives me the rule name that it's violating, the path of the HTML. I can inspect the HTML, I can copy the failure details into that, and I can file an issue directly into my GitHub URL. So that's great, but this still requires me to do it manually, and you can kind of smell what I'm selling here. Yeah. So you can go and add that to Edge and Chrome if you're kind of lucky. It works. So motivators. Now we've got the Agile, now we've got the tool. Let's look at motivators, your unique organization's motivators. So stick or carrot. So legislation, the stick. So remember GDPR? How it ruined the web experience? Pop-up, do you accept cookies? Pop-up, do you want to do this? Pop-up, pop-up, pop-up. I actually wait. I go, okay, open a site. I'm going to wait until they leave me alone. Okay, close, 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 carry on. So GDPR hit us hard, and it kind of hit us hard because you were not allowed to actually deal with an EU customer, even if your EU customer was inside South Africa, or you would have a fine or a jail sentence. And everyone kind of woke up within a month around that. And the accessibility rules are coming. By 2020, this year actually, you have to adhere to the US Century Integrated Digital Experience Act or the EU Parliament Directive on Digital Accessibility, with both say you have to conform to WCAG AA, or you get 100,000 Rand fine a day. Canada started to implement it. See, I've got your attention now. So I've showed you the stick. What about the carrot? So this is a nice quote. For most of human history, we put our innovative capacity into improving the quantity of life. Because we're living longer, our focus is starting to shift towards improving our quality of life. Altruism. We've decided that we want to actually be accessible. So stick or carrot. So we've got both of those motivators, and both of those pushing the motivators, and we still have that hardware. So how do we solve the hardware? We start to look at how to get into that empathy bubble. Because empathy leads to compassion. It starts with pity, sympathy, empathy, and then compassion. And how you do that, you actually have empathy labs. So a big driver now is to, as part of your design process, is to create these empathy labs and that are invigilated by empathy professionals. We have that at Microsoft. We have emotional intelligence designers that are starting to design our AI and our tools around empathy. So you define that, you can book that with multiple providers, and then you define your persona spectrums. And we'll go through a nice example also on how you can do this. So you define your persona spectrum. You can see here Ron, 82-year-old, retired, multiple conditions, arthritis, losing his hearing, hip replacement, doesn't use any assistive technology. And then you actually sit through your website, through these empathy labs, and you run through these persona spectrums. And these all form part of inclusive design. And inclusive design is made to first recognize exclusion, to solve for one, extend to many. Remember Ron? So Ron was elderly, and his eyesight was failing, which I may have failed my eye test driver's license, but I got it on the 4th time. So just word of advice, if you get in a car with me, just stay on my left side, right side, one of the sides, damn it. Solve for one, extend to many. Once we solve for someone who's visually impaired, we can cater for Ron. And then learn from diversity. So let's take a persona spectrum. A person who has an amputee, someone who is missing an arm. So we have a person with one arm, then we have a person with an arm injury. Like I recently found out that 22 years of using a mouse with my right arm isn't really good, and now I have something called frozen shoulder, and like I can't do. How did I get damage from using a mouse for 22 years? And then finally we have new parents. And we all know parents, you're kind of disabled, right? Financially, mentally, sleep, all of that, right? And you're holding that child there for dear life. So if you go to your manager and you say, I want to code, I want to for and have empathy towards that person with one arm. He's going to say, okay, that's great. How many people? So these stats actually come from the US Center for Disability Statistics. So the person with one arm, there's 26,000 in America who have amputees. The temporary disabilities, 13 million. The situational disabilities, you disabled parents, are 8 million. So catering and having empathy for that one persona spectrum and extending it to people in that persona spectrum is actually going to cater for 21 million people. There are 1 billion people out there who have accessibility requirements. Friends and family included, more than 3 billion. We actually outnumber the people without accessibility requirements. It's a big industry also. They estimated at $1 trillion that people are actually not catering towards. Stick and carrot. So once you have your persona spectrum, this is a ticketing scenario to actually go in on a website and buy a ticket. You can see there we've got the registration, navigation, and checkout. You take your persona spectrums, you superimpose them, and the entire world changes. Instead of having the normal process, when you have your landing, you have a responsive design. Capture, font and color options, accessibility help desk, single sign-on. On the navigation, you have a callback option, one-button access. And then checkout, SMS and email, one-button access, and then AI adjustment. And I've spoken many times on how to actually teach an AI sarcasm, actually in this room a year ago. Because what I wanted to show you is how to create empathetic AI. And once you have that, the AI will say, wait a second, this person is suffering. I'm going to adjust the entire process to cater for the accessibility requirements. You can see it in the Rubyfuza 2019 videos. So you apply your persona, and then you have your empathy transformation practices. So create a central team to manage the transformation, an empathy team. Create an empathy program to drive motivation, reward. Do the carrot rather than the stick. Make high quality learning resources available and integrate them onto onboarding. Form a team of accessibility coaches to coach agile teams. Create an accessibility dashboard to measure progress. So let's talk about milestones. So now that we know what we need to do, what about the shift left that I mentioned? So this is the typical kind of UX design that you're so used to. And you can see there, you've got the wireframe, the product backlog, the spring backlog, the sprints and rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. Then we deliver, and then you test for accessibility. You hand it over to another company that says yes or no. But we have shift left now. We're shifting left not only for accessibility, but for security. Because I'm seeing more and more customers right now who can't even use their own products, their own systems, because they are locking down the security either in the beginning or the end, or they're testing for accessibility right at the end. But the shift left says, and it's an agile practice, incorporate it in the beginning. Incorporate accessibility testing throughout the entire process. We do that with tools. So for a long time, I taught unit testing. And what I realized is that you can spot someone who lies about unit testing. You go to a CTO and go, does your team unit test? And the minute he scratches his nose, there's no unit test there. So I'm going to introduce you to something called XCore. Remember that accessibility insights tool? That actually runs an engine called XCore. That's an open source engine. And now it's incorporated in a lot of tools. So we're going to look at how to actually use XCore in our DevOps pipeline. So it's a JavaScript library, and it scans a rendered DOM, exactly like we saw with the toolset. Reports the back in JSON, same engine that Accessibility Insights uses. You've got your developer, your DevOps pipeline. You can do yarn test, .NET test, rake. You've got your test page. And then it'll create your report. But let's see that in real life. So this is your the industry leader, whoop whoop, Azure DevOps, and this it's free for one pipeline. And if you have an open source project, you get 10 free pipelines. So you've got .NET test, and you can see right at the bottom there, this is actually using the pipeline samples in .NET for TypeScript and Selenium, and you have the samples there, the XCore samples that you can actually start incorporating in your .NET test. But we're in a Ruby conference. Yay, Ruby! And we want to know how to do this in Ruby, right? So I introduce you to X-Matches gem. And X-Matches gem uses BDD and can actually test using the same core X engine as part of your Selenium, your Cucumber, and any of your core tests. All of these URLs will actually be available via the barcode, the QR code that you get there. So that means that you can actually, as part of your rake build, add now with X-Matches, and a test you can do fast pass, you can check for core accessibility issues or specific accessibility issues. You can put it into Azure DevOps, so you can just put it into your standard build. And there's also one step further. Remember AAA? Why not actually design upfront with accessible controls? And they're called pattern libraries. So pattern libraries, so offered by DQ Labs, the same company that actually creates the X engine, which means that from the beginning, your buttons, your controls, your forms will be accessible from the beginning. So in summary, let's look at what you can introduce to your teams today. Include users with disabilities in research. The biggest supporters and believers and protagonists of accessibility would be the people who actually have something to lose. Communicate your design intent. The shift left. Make sure that you tell people what you're going to do. Leverage a pattern library. Automated testing library. And then automate your accessibility testing in a DevOps pipeline. And measure, cut twice, measure 3 times. And then have a retrospective, which doesn't actually have only coffee debts, but also test. Wait a second, your definition of done should be also included in, with accessibility. And once you have that tool set done, you'll have the sleekest and most agile tool that you can find. And you won't actually be shifting left and trying to do the impossible, which is row down a river with an inaccessible rowboat. This is actually my top tweet that I ever did. If you follow me at Rory Preddy, you'll know that I do a 50% memes and 50% Azure updates. This got 1.7 million views. I spoke to people from China, from Japan. It was a whirlwind. It was a very stressful time, actually. So in conclusion, empathy. Run the labs. Look at how to create it. All of those persona spectrums are actually available right now. And with the governments starting to mandate it, they're really, really kind of giving you the opportunity for free documentation and processes. Shift left. Shift left with security. Shift left with accessibility. Shift left with all of the features that we left right to the end. And automate. Thanks, everyone. I've got one question. Okay, so like I did with that little Venn diagram, you have to put your hands up, though. So the first person to hands up, what's the name of the Venn diagram that you have to have purpose? Yes. Thank you. Well done.